You guys, just a quick update on the NATO-Russia relations, as a lot has happened during the course of the past, 5 days since I've been on, because, a lot happened over here too, and some of us got busy with work and life and everything. So, at any rate, since the last update, I set another meeting on Thursday at noon with a former ambassador to both Washington and Moscow. And his words on Russia were more along the lines of what my take has been for quite a while, and more along the lines of what George Friedman, his take has been for quite a while, and what you'd see in Caspian report here on YouTube, in their analogies and his work on Russian affairs, foreign policy, etc., etc. So that's more along those lines than the speakers from before. So yeah. At any rate, some of the key takeaways that he pointed out were in regard to just Russian leadership, the Kremlin, not quite frankly understanding the Western mindset, or the Western leadership mindset, or thought of how Western democracy functions, etc. And and I would agree. I would also suggest that that's very much a vice versa. I don't think Western leaders understand how Russian leadership thinks, and how they take action, etc. How the whole structure of command and cooperation within the Russian political infrastructure is designed. So I think that's very much a mutual problem that Russia and the NATO countries share, that they can't really understand how the other one thinks. Another point that he brought up was in regard to the Mueller investigation, and now Mueller indictment, following the U.S. elections. And the main takeaway from that was he pointed out that the amount of money that those individuals tying up to the Kremlin, but again, it's the indictment lists individuals and companies. So yeah, the main takeaway again is that the amount that they put into it, the budget, total budget into they put into action, was so tiny compared to the overall budgets of both the Hillary campaign and the Trump campaign, and those combined, that it just that investment just dwarfed the overall cost and expenditures of the campaigns themselves. So the impact of that shouldn't have had a say. You have so basically, yeah, if you have 1/20th of the total budget of the candidate to run a sabotage campaign, and you succeed, then maybe that candidate's campaign wasn't that strong to begin with. It's a lot of people would say that that some of the leaks that came out that defamed her, Hillary, and discredited her, were unsubstantiated information, etc. And yeah, there's probably a whole conversation to be had there, but a lot of the leaks and the scoops and info also seemed very credible to a lot of people. So what's that? And if you're, I think I read somewhere about, don't quote me completely on that, I don't have the exact numbers, but I think some article that I read suggested that the budget was about $1.25 million a month throughout the campaign and preceding and following hours. So with a budget like that, just how much can you really, how much influence can you really buy for that, outside of just catering to the confirmation bias of people who are already against Hillary, who already bought into the 30 plus years of Clinton conspiracy talks, etc., etc. So for that amount of money, how many new new voters do you get to swap franchises? It's always a question. So the extent to which any particular Russian involvement could have realistically thrown that campaign and thrown the result against her and in Trump's favor. That's really what people are calling into question on that one, given the information of the Mueller investigation and the indictment. So yeah, that's an entire conversation in and of itself. As far as the Skripal case goes, now new information came out there as well. There was an independent research done in Switzerland, I believe, by a laboratory in Switzerland, which is a member under the, what was the organization called? The OPCW, so Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the one that I mentioned in the last video as well. And so, according to Russian Foreign Secretary Sergei Lavrov, the some details of that report, that that lab's investigation or research had concluded that the nerve agent was Western and not Russian or old Soviet. So that would have cleared him up. But again, this is something that the UK refutes, and the lab in Switzerland has been silent on it, which doesn't help us at all. And according to what I'm reading right here on a site, swissinfo.ch, I haven't fact checked this. I just got into it, so I admit that. I'll link the article that I'm reading, and then we'll fact check it together. But according to this, the authorities in Switzerland have rejected joint Russian probe into the Skripal case, which again doesn't help. And if the OPCW, well, I mean, I guess they have a challenge now on their hands from Moscow to include those details if they do exist. And all we have right now is Russia's word against the UK's word, and we're left with very little. And if the lab, because it's a part of the OPCW, which I believe is under the UN, although I don't want to stress that as firm fact, because quite frankly I haven't really researched the organization. But yeah, if the lab, because they're a part of this organization, say that they can't comment independently, then yeah, we have to push the organization. Is that organization deliberately being biased in the case? Then that is a serious concern for the integrity of international law. So this is we're not going to see the end of this incident and the shitstorm that it has created for a good while now. And then, of course, yeah, we bombed Syria again, punished them for the latest sarin attack that would make no strategic sense on the part of Damascus, on Assad's government, but we're constantly being told that he's the only one doing it. And again, like I've mentioned before, in spite of the fact that that other players in the Syrian civil war may have gotten their hands on government supplies off the gas and might be deploying that to create false flags and get Western involvement in there to serve their strategic aims and agenda. But yeah, this is again another crazy story. We have no genuine way as informed citizens in a democracy to prove to ourselves so that we may make informed decisions and vote based on informed citizenry. We have no way of knowing whether Assad himself actually carried out these attacks, or his military, or rebels or any other fighting factions aiming to frame him. So we went over there and dropped a few more tomahawks based on claims that we, quite frankly, can't get completely verified as citizens without a shadow of a doubt. So we're relying on our intelligence agencies and independent organizations whose leadership we don't even know. All these human rights organizations, what have you. And I I mentioned briefly last time the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is an organization that kind of looks like it has a ghost existence on top of it, because we really don't know who those people are, what they do, what their affiliations are, and their backgrounds. So we're basing our decisions off of a very gray and murky area type of claims, suspicions, allegations, whatever. It's a tough day to be a NATO citizen, absolutely, especially if you're aspiring to be a responsible one or moral one for that sense. So yeah, so that's another story. Anyways, yeah, we dropped some bombs, and while the Syrian Air Force and army were preparing to counter that, of course, ISIS, which has almost lost every bit of ground they ever had in Syria and the Levant, they saw an opening and launched an advance against the Syrian authorities. So yeah, it surely benefited ISIS to try and gain some ground again in the country, which they had pretty much completely lost. So maybe we're causing a backfire on our own previous strategy, if you will. So yeah, the fight against ISIS is gonna go on for a long time if we keep attacking everyone who might hold them at bay locally and giving them windows to advance just after we've pushed them back somewhere else. I mean, come on, this is insane. And yeah, of course, if the FSA has still has an agenda, and which I believe they do, then yeah, this is only going to serve them to just get us completely out of there. And then what? What kind of government would the FSA install in Syria if they got their way? Would that be anything? Would that be anything less destructive or less abusive to citizens, or anything that anyone could collaborate with? Would that be something the general public in Syria would want? Do we even ask them at this point? So they have two factions fighting, and I'm sure the civilians in Syria don't all agree on everything either. So this is a complete shitstorm. So Syrian civil war was very much, until very recently, it was moving to a place of a foreseeable end. That may have been thrown off. And yeah, the Russia NATO relations, might be at an even darker stage right now than it was, and it was already pretty tense. There's one thing to be said. I think President Trump can say, well, hey, if I'm a Putin puppet, I'm a pretty useless puppet. Because that case is definitely making itself. But still, yeah, those are the three biggest takeaways. So yeah, Russian involvement in the U.S. elections. How much could it realistically have mattered? What would it ever have been enough to overthrow a campaign or affect the result in general? Then bombing Syria and just trusting the information that we have stresses and claims that Assad is really behind these sarin attacks, when both of these sarin attacks are happening at a time where he's at his strongest and it looks like he's really winning and getting things his way. It's like it would be self-sabotage at a time wherein you're getting every bit of an advantage to at least get a hearing on the international stage and manage to actually close the fighting, the war situation, get things stabilized. So it wouldn't make any sense. But yeah, again, if you just assume that Assad is a stupid maniac, then yeah, I've seen the man talk, and he's run a country quite a while. Coming from a minority, I have no reason to believe him to be stupid. So yeah, it's there's that. All these things. Just wanted to give you a quick shout out on that, and let's just say Syrian authorities and Russian authorities and the West they're not gonna get along for a good while yet, and they're not gonna agree on things for a good while yet, and um, this might get darker still, get more tense still. Uh, yeah, we're just gonna have to see how that is going to affect daily life, both in the West and in Russia and in the Middle East. If things get really, really tense, it might actually genuinely affect not just business and trade and transportation and travel, but other aspects of daily life. And then we as people need to adapt to those altered realities. Yeah, I hope you guys have some aces up your sleeves for that. Because yeah, I just wish the best for humanity in general and people, good for people. So we'll see. It's interesting time for thinking minds to be alive, but not pleasant when you know what the disasters it's causing are the scope of the disasters it's causing. Anyways, those are my 2 cents for today. So more to come on these affairs and other affairs and scholarly affairs and yeah, every bit of what I cover. And I might add some topics. So you be the judges. And I see what you like and what you don't like when I look at these stats. So we'll tailor to that. Anyways, for now, biking out.